So at 5 o'clock this afternoon, Montreal inked a deal to bring Alexandre Texier to Montreal for 1 year, $1 million. Now, while the St. Louis Blues bottom out, how does the signing impact the Canadiens as it is right now? Let's talk some puck. Hey gang, Kosta here from PuckTalk Montreal. Welcome to another episode where we talk about the signing of Alexandre Texier. And before we get into it, let's take a look and talk about our partners. Instacustoms.com is Canada's highest rated print shop with over 3,000 Google reviews and a 4.9 star rating. They offer direct-to-garment printing on all your favorite clothing, along with coffee and travel mugs, and they even offer embroidery. Habs won a Stanley Cup? You can win too on Stanley Street at Instacustoms.com. CheapersT-shirts.ca has men's, women's, and children's t-shirts, all sizes, hoodies too, with over 1,000 products to choose from. Anything you need for merchandise or the best deals on everyday clothing, CheapestT-shirts.ca is your go-to source. Buy today, ship tomorrow, CheapestT-shirts.ca. So when it comes to the acquisition of Texier, we know that the reason why the Canadiens got him is because of the injury issues they've had of late. Losing Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook really put a damper on the depth of the Montreal Canadiens. But what does it mean? Well, first, if we're going to look, let's take a look back at why the St. Louis Blues let Texier go. Well, number one, he wasn't playing very much. Only 8 games on the season, 1 assist in those 8 games. Wasn't playing on the power play. Really wasn't, performing very well in the sense that he wasn't getting opportunities to be able to generate any offense. And he didn't really fit how the team played. So it was decided mutually to terminate his contract. Like the Blues, they end up opening up $2.1 million on their cap. And for the Canadiens, $1 million, low risk, high reward possibility, much like a lot of the deals that we've seen Kent Hughes make over the years. And Texier is very ambitious. It takes balls to bet on yourself the way he did, where he refused his AHL assignment. That's what prompted the termination. That's why Doug Armstrong spoke to him in the first place. Texier coming up saying, you know what, I think I'm better than the American Hockey League. Going down will not help me. Can you terminate my contract so I can sign somewhere else as a free agent? They accommodated him. And that speaks volumes towards the St. Louis Blues organization. And for the Canadiens, they get a French-speaking player who's got an offensive upside and, can produce a little bit. Now, how much can he produce? Well, if you take a look back historically, let's bring up his hockey DB for a minute. And if you take a look at 240 games, he's got 91 points. None too shabby for a guy who was a second-round pick, 45th overall by the by the Columbus Blue Jackets way back in the day. And while his production wasn't really anything to talk about in the last couple of seasons, again, not fitting in with the way the St. Louis Blues played, that doesn't mean he's a horrible player. Sometimes you end up with a guy that's got all kinds of talent but just doesn't fit the mold when it comes to the style of play. That's part of what the Canadiens are banking on. The fact that it's cheap, low risk, and very high reward in the sense that he may very well bring something to the table that the Canadiens need. Speed, a good shot, stick handling ability, and offense generation. So why not go out and get him? He's got NHL experience. 240 games is not a small amount of games. He's also got 40 goals and 51 assists in his career, so good numbers, despite the fact that he's only played 240 games. And the fact that, he speaks French, that's another upside for the Montreal Canadiens. He's also versatile, He's got offensive potential. He's got a decent shot, as I mentioned. He generates offense, and he's played both center and the wing, so it provides a little bit of depth for the Canadiens at the center position, because right now, after what happened with Jake Evans the other night, everybody was biting their lip, wondering whether or not Evans was going to come back. And if not, the Canadiens would have been in deep trouble because they would have been missing one of their top 4 centers. Now, if there's one thing that we could talk about Texier is he's hungry and he's motivated. He wants to do well. As you look at these highlights, you can see that he's got, potential. And that's definitely what the Canadiens are banking on. The fact that, he knows he's got a nose for the net. He knows where to go. He could score in tight. He could score from outside, just anything. And one of the other things is that he's familiar to Zach Bolduc. A lot of people forget that part. Bolduc and Texier playing together last season with the Blues. I'm sure that Bolduc has something to say about the acquisition of Texier to the Canadiens organization. So, it's all those pluses that make it worthwhile for the Canadiens to make this move. But when you look at this move, you've got to ask yourself, how does this affect the rest of the lineup? So the number one thing it's going to do after the start he had the other night, it's going to reduce the chance of Florian Xhekaj getting into the lineup. Now, granted, right now you've got Jared Davidson in the lineup and Florian Xhekaj. So who's going to be able to stay in that lineup? Xhekaj making a good impression, but Davidson has as well with the way he played. Or has played, I should say. And so where do you make that distinction? Where do you make that decision? Who comes out to give Texier the space? Is it Xhekaj? Is it Davidson? Davidson hasn't registered a point just yet, but he's been solid up front, finishing his body checks, creating scoring opportunities, getting a couple of shots on goal. He hasn't been without his merits. So try to balance it out and see. Do you put Florian in for the extra fists, or do you put Davidson in for the extra propensity to score goals? It all depends, right? The Texier acquisition also increases the competition on the wing, right? Whether you're looking at, I wouldn't say Slafkovsky, but when you take a look at some of the guys that are in the American Hockey League right now that are looking to make their way back up to the NHL, whether it's Beck, although Beck is a center, or some of the other players, who's going to be able to come up? It's an interesting dilemma for the Canadiens, but at the same time, given the fact that he's got 240 games under his belt, plus he's got playoff experience, which is even more valuable to the Canadiens, I think it's a safe bet that Texier is the better option than bringing somebody up from the American Hockey League. It also gives the Habs a safer defensive option in the sense that somebody who's a veteran can be afforded the opportunity to start in the defensive zone because he's already used to it, especially in a system like St. Louis's, where they focus on defense first. You can give him late game shifts. You can, give him some penalty kill to fill in some time. You could even use him if the necessity comes around on the power play, given the fact that he does have an offensive upside. And in all actuality, Texier might help Xhekaj, or Florian, I should say, long term, in the sense that Xhekaj won't be forced into situations that he's not ready for. Where he can focus on forechecking, physicality, net drive, improving his defensive responsibilities, and doesn't really have to put too much pressure on himself to produce offensively. Although getting a point the other night was really a cool thing, he could focus on the other side of the game, which is always so important to Marty, because after all, Florian did have trouble with the defensive side of the game when he was with the Canadiens during the preseason. And Texier could also be that bubble guy. If Xhekaj outplays him, or if Davidson outplays him, then it could be Texier in the press box, if you get what I mean. So there's a lot of different things and different ways you can use Texier, right? And another thing that everybody has to think about is Texier could also be a trade chip. If he does produce numbers with the Canadiens, if he does show well, then when the Canadiens are ready to actually try to make a deal for a second line center, you could throw in a guy like Texier to be able to try to get maximum value for him if he produces. Now, right now, as I said, he's only got 1 point in 8 games. He's not worth a pot to piss in, but, given his history, I'm sure he can produce points. And given the proper line mates, I think he may provide some very good offensive options for the Canadiens. And again, he may become valuable. And that value, especially on a trade market where, goals are at a premium, if he could provide 10, 15 maybe, then maybe, just maybe, he might bring some value and be able to turn that into a second line center or even a draft pick for us to use to get a second line center. There was a lot of, his best season was back in 2023-24 with Columbus when he had 12 goals and 18 assists, 30 points in 78 games. That's not great, but it's not bad either for a guy who doesn't play on the first and second line, He's got a career minus 15, so really not the best defensive player, as it were. But minus 15 in 240 games isn't a bad number either, And he's got value beyond just scoring. He brings defensive responsibility. He can bring some physicality. And again, he's got that playoff experience that I talked about. So All these things are pluses for the Canadiens. What's negative? Well, one thing the Texier acquisition does, it brings in some relative negativity as far as the Canadiens' belief in their farm hands. Guys like Beck, Xhekaj, Davidson, Roy. It just goes to show that they still think they're not ready. So if Joshua Roy is not ready to be an NHLer now, when will he be? For that matter, when is Owen Beck going to get his opportunity? I mean, that question gets asked time and time again. Now, granted, Beck did have a cup of coffee last season. Didn't produce much. Showed some offensive prowess, but didn't really get any points. So, does that mean the Canadiens' patience is worn thin? Maybe because Texier is 6'1", they wanted to bring a little bit more size into the mix, which is something that people have been clamoring for. It's always a possibility. But to me, I hope it doesn't come off like the Canadiens don't believe in their farm system. There's a lot of good players on the farm. I mentioned 4 already, right? When it comes to Xhekaj, Beck, Davidson, Roy, those are 4 guys that could actually play very well. But then you think about it for a minute, and when you guys, a guy like Laurent Dauphin, as an example, he could probably bring the same skill set that Texier brings, although not as nifty with his hands. But Dauphin has proven that he could play at the NHL level when he was back with the Phoenix Coyotes. So why wouldn't Dauphin be an option for the Canadiens? I don't know. Maybe because he's a little bit older, long in the tooth. I have no idea. But overall, my impression of the Texier deal, I don't mind it. At $1 million, it's not much of a risk. If nothing comes of it, if he doesn't produce, if he doesn't grow any value for the trade market, you don't re-sign him and you move on. But the only thing I worry about more than anything else is what I just mentioned. Will his acquisition be detrimental vis-a-vis your farmhands, the kids that are playing down with the Laval Rocket? That remains to be seen. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully things remain positive. But right now the Canadiens are looking for more depth. And they've got it in Texier. Can't blame him for that. So let's see what he brings to the table. Obviously, we know he's going to be going out west with the team. How much he plays will probably depend on how well he does in that first game versus the Utah Mammoth. And that's really a good game to bring him in for, right? If you were to bring him in against a team like the Vegas Golden Knights or the Colorado Avalanche, that may not very well reflect positively on him because of the fact that those teams are so strong. But with Utah, they've got comparable, if not a little bit less talent than the Montreal Canadiens. So let's see what he brings to the table next Wednesday and move forward from there. Personally, though, as I said, I don't mind it. I think it's a positive step for the Canadiens to get a little bit more depth up front. And worst case scenario, when the Canadiens get healthy, I don't foresee Texier saying, oh, I'm not accepting my AHL assignment when the time comes. For that matter, the Canadiens may very well not send him down because they still have one extra roster spot. Remember, they only had 22 guys coming out of camp, which means they could carry an extra forward if they feel the need. Given Texier and his situation coming out of St. Louis, they may very well do that ahead of the trade deadline. But we'll see. Only time will tell. Thanks again to our sponsors, InstaCustoms.com and cheapesttshirts.ca. And we'll see you for another episode of PuckTalk Montreal tomorrow.